Welcome back to our channel, where we dive deep into the daily drama of Genoa City. It is a beautiful day to unravel the tangled webs of our favorite families. Let us jump straight into the latest heart-stopping developments that are about to change everything. For Claire, the journey to finding a place within the formidable Newman family has been a perilous and emotionally exhausting pilgrimage. After a lifetime of feeling unanchored, manipulated, and isolated, she had finally begun to lay down roots in a soil that felt permanently secure. She had been cautiously accepting Victoria Newman not just as a biological reality, but as a mother she could genuinely trust and rely upon. This delicate foundation, built on tentative smiles, shared moments of vulnerability, and a desperate hope for a normal future, is about to be completely obliterated. The revelation that Victoria has developed deep, romantic feelings for Kyle Abbott strikes Claire not merely as a shocking piece of gossip, but as a profound psychological trauma. It is a betrayal that transcends ordinary family dysfunction, cutting straight to the fragile core of Claire's sense of belonging and security. The psychological weight of this discovery threatens to pull Claire back into the dark, chaotic spaces of her mind that she has fought so incredibly hard to escape. She is forced to process the horrifying reality that Victoria's romantic desires have entirely eclipsed her maternal responsibilities. Claire stands in the quiet, imposing shadows of the Newman legacy, suffocating under the realization that her mother is willing to risk their newly forged, highly sensitive bond for a reckless, forbidden romance. The trauma is not rooted in a simple misunderstanding. It is anchored in the devastating truth that Victoria, fully aware of the complicated and painful history between Kyle and Claire, chose to pursue this deeply inappropriate connection anyway. This toxic knowledge acts as a slow-moving poison, seeping into Claire's consciousness and rotting away the trust she had so painstakingly cultivated over the recent months. She feels entirely isolated, suddenly realizing she is nothing more than a collateral casualty in a much larger, darker game of corporate espionage and forbidden lust that she never asked to be a part of. The realization that her mother could be so incredibly selfish forces Claire to re-evaluate every single interaction they have had since she was welcomed into the Newman fold. She wonders if the maternal warmth was just an illusion, a temporary performance by a woman who is ultimately driven only by her own insatiable appetites and complex corporate vendettas. To truly understand the absolute devastation of this betrayal, one must look closely at the toxic, vengeful soil from which this romance recently bloomed. Kyle Abbott is currently a man consumed by a dark, unyielding thirst for vengeance. Driven by the recent severe traumas inflicted upon his parents, Jack and Diane, by the sociopathic Dr. Markham, Kyle is operating on pure, aggressive adrenaline. Firmly believing that Victor Newman orchestrated the entire kidnapping and stabbing nightmare, Kyle has been aggressively demanding a devastating retaliation against the Newman Empire, completely rejecting his father's desire for a peaceful ceasefire. In his desperate, manic hunt for leverage to destroy the Newman patriarch, Kyle found an unlikely and highly dangerous ally in Victoria. Torn between an inherent loyalty to her ruthless father and her own growing moral outrage at Victor's endless destructive machinations, Victoria crossed an absolute, unforgivable line. She began secretly funneling highly sensitive, confidential internal Newman Enterprises documents to Kyle, handing him the very weapons he needed to dismantle her family's legacy. What began as a clandestine alliance of convenience, forged in the dark fires of mutual resentment toward Victor, has now mutated into a deeply inappropriate, highly volatile, and destructive romantic entanglement. Claire pieces together this treacherous puzzle with a terrifying, crystal-clear clarity. She sees the illicit meetings, the lingering, guilty glances, and the undeniable gravitational pull between her mother and the Abbott heir. Instead of succumbing to a hysterical breakdown or a tearful tantrum, Claire's trauma manifests as a chilling, hyper-rational calm. She absolutely refuses to allow herself to be the emotionally unstable victim in this catastrophic scenario. Drawing upon a deep reservoir of inner strength that she cultivated during her darkest days, she prepares to confront the woman who has so casually and callously shattered her world. Claire knows that a screaming match will only allow Victoria to deflect, manipulate, and justify her actions. Therefore, she chooses a much more devastating weapon: cold, unyielding, surgical logic. The confrontation between mother and daughter takes place in a heavy, suffocating silence, far removed from the prying eyes and listening ears of the Newman patriarch. When Claire finally stands before Victoria, the atmosphere in the room grows instantly cold and incredibly dense. There are no raised voices, no shattered glass, and no dramatic soapy tears. Instead, Claire approaches Victoria with a terrifyingly calm demeanor, her eyes entirely devoid of the warmth and hope that had recently begun to blossom between them. Victoria, immediately sensing the monumental, tectonic shift in her daughter's energy, feels the crushing, paralyzing weight of her own guilt crashing down upon her shoulders. With a voice as steady and cold as stone, Claire begins to systematically dismantle Victoria's flimsy justifications. She sharply and unapologetically questions her mother's fundamental morality, demanding to know how Victoria could so easily discard the basic concept of familial respect. Claire points out the glaring, ugly hypocrisy of a woman who demands absolute loyalty from her family and her employees, yet secretly climbs into bed with the ultimate enemy. She forces Victoria to confront the harsh reality of her actions, highlighting the profound lack of consideration for Claire's own painful history and unresolved feelings regarding Kyle. Every single word Claire speaks is a highly calculated strike, designed not to inflict superficial emotional pain, but to expose the deep, ugly truth of Victoria's inherent selfishness. She does not allow her mother the luxury of romanticizing the affair as some grand, unstoppable passion. She strips it down to its core, pathetic elements of betrayal, corporate treason, and profound familial disrespect. The most devastating blow comes when Claire articulates her profound, soul-crushing disappointment. She speaks of the immense emotional labor it took to open her guarded heart to Victoria, to look past the intimidating Newman armor, and accept her as a true biological mother. Claire describes the fragile hope she had nurtured, the desperate belief that she had finally found a safe harbor in a world that had always been incredibly cruel and unforgiving to her. To have that safe harbor violently dismantled by Victoria's own reckless, impulsive desires is a tragedy that Claire conveys with heartbreaking, undeniable clarity. She watches closely as Victoria's polished composure completely crumbles under the immense weight of this undeniable truth. Victoria is forced to look directly into the eyes of the daughter she fought so hard to reclaim, only to realize that her own selfish actions have likely severed that precious, irreplaceable bond forever. Having delivered her devastating, irrefutable verdict to her mother, Claire refuses to leave the destruction unaddressed at its other primary source. She turns her piercing, analytical focus toward Kyle Abbott. When she seeks him out, she does not carry the frantic, chaotic energy of a jealous ex-lover or a woman scorned. Her demeanor remains firmly anchored in that same chilling, practical logic. Claire approaches Kyle as an intellectual equal, a woman who understands the dark, treacherous undercurrents of Genoa City far better than he currently realizes. She looks at Kyle with a heavy, sorrowful disappointment, recognizing him not as a romantic conqueror, but as a deeply flawed, traumatized man blinded by his own toxic ambitions. Claire issues a stark, uncompromising warning to Kyle, dissecting his psychological motivations with a precision that leaves him entirely exposed and defenseless. She plainly states that this illicit relationship will serve as the undeniable catalyst for a catastrophic corporate and personal war that will decimate both the Newman and Abbott families. Claire does not mince words. She points out that Kyle is not driven by some grand, sweeping romance, but by a desperate, ugly, and consuming need to inflict pain upon Victor Newman. She exposes the harsh reality that Kyle is merely using Victoria as a convenient, highly effective tool to access Newman's secrets and strike at the very heart of his enemy. By laying bare his true dark intentions, Claire strips Kyle of any moral high ground he thought he possessed in his self-righteous crusade against Victor. She forces him to confront the ugly truth that he is rapidly becoming the very monster he claims to be fighting against. She reminds Kyle that Victoria is a mother whose life will be completely destroyed when this secret is inevitably exposed. As Claire turns and walks away, leaving both her mother and Kyle to stew in the toxic reality of their choices, a dark, oppressive shadow falls over Genoa City. With Claire now holding the explosive truth of this treacherous romance and corporate treason, the balance of power hangs by a microscopic thread. The lingering, terrifying question remains: how long can this volatile secret stay hidden from the omniscient gaze of Victor Newman, And when the ruthless patriarch finally discovers that his own daughter has slept with the enemy and handed over the keys to his kingdom, who will be the first to perish in the ensuing, unstoppable inferno?